Welcome to Abundant Feminine, a podcast of my fellow girls where we talk about entrepreneurship, manifesting, and just keep things real as fuck. I'm your host, Krista Chambers, and I'm so stoked to be here making this very first episode. This has been a long time coming, and I'm just so grateful that it's coming to life. Since it's the first episode, I definitely want to introduce what my plans are for this. So Abundant Feminine is meant to be bringing on other female entrepreneurs so that they can tell their stories. They can just hopefully inspire other girls out there that might be having their business or thinking about starting one. And for me personally, I mean, whenever I hear about other girls or meet other girls who have their businesses and are just doing their thing, killing it, like that makes me feel really good and just inspired. It makes me feel like, wow, okay, she's doing it. Okay, maybe I can do it too, you know? Because it's the first one, I figured I would just introduce myself. Since I'm going to be asking other people about their journey, I think that it's only fair that I talk about my journey too. So my life has definitely been pretty untraditional since I was about 15, because that was the year that I basically dropped out of high school and I started my photography business. And I know that sounds really crazy, and I'll give you some backstory about what really happened, but that was my start. Another thing is with this, like I said in the beginning, I definitely want to talk about manifesting, and in general, I never want to be preachy about talking about the law of attraction, even though I really feel in my heart that it so works. So basically, if you're not into that kind of thing at all, this probably isn't the podcast for you. But if you are open to that kind of thing, or you love it too, like me, then hi. I hope that this can be really fun and just give perspective on different things. I know for me as well, when I hear about other people practicing manifesting and having shit attracted to them, it's like, hell yeah. Like, it's just not that I need more reassurance, that it's just like extra like frosting on top of like this shit works, you know? So I feel like to start the story, I have to take it back to when I was about 6. My dad actually always had this dream of making surfboards. All growing up, he had all kinds of different jobs. I think when I was a baby, he was working in like the construction industry, and then he switched over to real estate where he was like flipping homes. And then when I was about 6, he shaped his first board, got it glassed and everything, and ended up working pretty good. So he was stoked, and that trickled into being a full business for him. I mean, within a year, we had a store. It was like so awesome. And just seeing him get to do something he loved was really cool. And I hope that I can bring him on for an episode to talk about his journey and stuff as well. But that definitely really impacted me and him in general, because he would always tell me that, you know, in society, I guess, it's like you go to school and then you get a job and it might suck, but that's just life. And he really instilled in me that that doesn't have to be life. You can be 50. He'd always say that, like, I'm 50 years old and I'm still enjoying my life. And that's so true. It's like we can really make this life what we want. And we can do anything if we set our mind and our heart to it. Anyway, he always encouraged me to be an entrepreneur. He had that in himself, and it was something that he wanted for me. And so fast forward a bit, I went to middle school, high school. I ended up switching schools a couple of times during that period because I just didn't really... I was not enjoying where I was. So basically, I was going to one and I hated it. It was like terrible. So I switched over to a different school, and it was okay for a little bit, but definitely ended up just not feeling good there either. I think like most girls can relate to having like stupid high school, middle school drama with other girls. And so I begged him to go to public school, and he was not having it. he was like, okay, you can either stay in this private school or you can be homeschooled. And I'm like, it was a hard decision for me because I'm like definitely a pretty social person, I feel like. So thinking about not being able to interact with people, that had me not jumping on the opportunity right away. But at the same time, it wasn't that hard. I totally decided to be homeschooled. And you have to be 16 to get your GED. I left my sophomore year, so I was 15 at the time. So I couldn't get it quite yet. But he definitely was like, okay, well, you're not going to just do nothing. Like, you need to present to me the curriculum that you're going to do. So I'm like, okay. He really wanted me to do things that I would actually use in my life, which now at like 22, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you were pretty much totally on it with that. Like I'm so grateful for a lot of the stuff that he made me do at that point because it just makes my life easier now. So, for example, he wanted me to balance all the checkbooks, be in charge of paying all the bills every month, and just the things that I'd learned, he wanted it to be useful. So, like, for example, for math, he's like, okay, so what are you going to do for math? And I'm like, well, I heard of this thing called interest, and I have no idea what that is right now. So I'm like, I'm going to learn about this. So I ended up learning about, like, compound interest, which is, like, kind of funny, but also like, shit, I use that to this day. Like, now I understand what interest is. Like, they weren't going to teach me that in geometry, which is, I mean, this path is just so different. And I'm not telling anybody to do this. Like, do not tell your parents if you are in high school that, like Krista said, that you can just drop out. Like, no. And I'm not saying that this is better than going to school, because it's absolutely not that either. This is just the way that my life went. That was that. I would do my thing in science. I decided that what I'm going to learn about is like all of these different drugs. So like I was definitely really innocent at that point in my life. Like, I didn't do any drinking or drugs, but I was just intrigued. So I'm like, what is MDMA? Like, that was like my science class. I think that's so funny. So did that for a year, was definitely surfing a lot. And then I turned 16, which meant I could get my GED. So I went over to Lalehua because I grew up in Wahiawa and that was like my district. I took all of my GED tests within like the span of a week, I feel like. And then I was able to pass everything first crack. So I was grateful for that. And that was like the beginning of hearing what other people thought about this crazy way of doing my life at 15 or 16. So the guy who was in charge of the GED office spoke to the other lady in the office, and he was like, wow, look at this. Krista just passed all of her tests like on her first try. Isn't that awesome? And the other woman in the office said, yeah, too bad she couldn't have done that in school. And I'm like, okay, sis, like, wow. And at that point, I didn't really have anything to show for the fact that I left, you know? So I'm just like, okay, you know what? School office lady, one day I'm going to show you. And I'm sure she'll never see this, but it's just in my heart. I feel like, okay, I'm grateful I did that. I don't have any regrets about it. I'm stoked with where I am now. So, in your face, office lady. But within that time as well, that's when I kind of started my business. So it started because I would go on Instagram, and there was this one photographer that I loved from here, Casey Cowie, and she was doing mostly weddings at that point. And I don't know, I was just in love with her work. Like, I just thought it was the most beautiful thing, and it was so intriguing to me. And so because of my dad's surfboard business, he actually had DSLR cameras. So he had a 7D and like a 16 to 35 millimeter lens. For any of you camera people, I asked him one day, like, Dad, would you be okay if I borrow the camera? And he was like, yeah, sure. And he didn't really know how to use it super proficiently himself. Like, he definitely was shooting in some of the auto settings, so he showed me what he could. And then one of his friends, who's like an uncle to me, his name is Alan Mozo, and he is like a professionally trained photographer. He went to school for it and everything. And so one day he came over to our house to just cruise, talk story, and so as he was leaving, I was like, Uncle, do you think you could just show me how to use this real fast? And he's like, oh yeah, okay. And so he gave me like this 10-minute lesson that is like so useful to me to this day. I mean, it just was the start of everything. It was so simple, and I love that he did it like that, because it was just like I could take it in. So basically he's like, okay, if you want it to be like blurry in the back, you're gonna want to like change this style. If you want it to be brighter, like move this style. And that was like pretty much it. So I'm like, okay, like I'm stoked on this information. I'm like, I can have the background blurry. Like, I'm a real photographer now. Totally kidding. But also, like, that's what I wanted, like the blurry background was like a big first step in like my work looking more real. And so I called up my girlfriend, Cowie Goodness, who I also would love to have on the podcast, because she really helped me start. I mean, she was my test model like all the time. She was my little guinea pig, and she just lived up the street from me, so I invited her over. And then at the time, my dad was building me this like loft bedroom where my bed would be up in like the attic, I guess, of our garage. Crazy. But anyway, that's not the point. We climbed up there and we shot with like my newfound knowledge of making things brighter and blurry in the back. And then that was really the start of how I started shooting. I just wanted to do it all the time. And Cowie and I would shoot together a bunch, like at her house, at my house, walking down the street from our house, because we were so young. We didn't have cars or anything. And yeah, it was just really fun. Granted, even though I was like stoked about this, when I told my dad that like, okay, I know you want me to be an entrepreneur and I pick this, like I want to be a photographer. He was like, no, you don't. Don't you want to make money? And I'm like, okay, just you encouraged me all this time to do whatever and that I can do anything I want, but not this. Like, no, you taught me well enough to know that I can do this and I'm gonna do this. So besides Cowie, I started shooting with other friends and stuff. And then at that point, my goal was to be a wedding photographer, because that's what Casey Cowie, who is the photographer that I looked up to, was doing. And so my dad would also tell me, like, you don't want to deal with bridezillas and all of this stuff. But I was determined, okay? However, the path did change. So I, at one point, started reaching out to photographers that I liked. And so I went to go intern, basically, and hold a reflector for a photographer that did campaigns. And so she was working with a model. And that was the first time that I discovered that you can shoot people that know what they're doing and you don't have to pose them. And over the years, of course, I know how to pose anybody, even if they don't have modeling experience. But the fact that you can just, as the photographer, be creative and do your thing and set up your shots and stuff without having to tell them what to do. Like, they're doing their thing, I'm doing my thing, and together we can make this art, right? So I'm like, holy shit, this exists. Like, people know how to be in front of the camera. Like, that's the shit that I want. Like, I want to do this. So that's kind of when it switched over from wanting to be a wedding photographer to wanting to be a campaign photographer for brands. That was definitely a big turning point, and I'm grateful that I got to be there to shadow that shoot and see that. So I guess the first thing that made me a professional photographer, like the first work that I got paid for, was for two friends who I actually went to middle school with. Shout out to Michaela and Tori. They're both like killing it out there to this day. But they wanted to do a best friend photo shoot. And so I think they paid me like $50 or something crazy, like 25 each. And then I shot them. And that's like what made me feel like, okay, I'm getting paid for this now. Like, I was so stoked for that opportunity. It was just a step in the right direction of encouraging me that this could really be doable, you know? Even though it was so minimal, it was the start. Part of the start, I guess. And so another really monumental thing that happened was my dad also was friends with, or is friends with, another photographer named Clark Little, and he is a very well-known shore break photographer, wave photographer. He's fucking awesome. He sends it into some gnarly situations to get the shot. And I think even in shore break photography, he really innovated that field and opened the door to it. But he saw what I was doing, and he came out with a clothing line for his photography, and he asked me like, hey Krista, would you want to shoot for the clothing line? And I was like, yes, like so stoked. And that was like really helpful to me in having something to approach models and girls with, of like, I'm shooting for this line, like would you be interested in working with me? And that just opened the door for me to work with a bunch of different people. And then from there, like, I'm so grateful for that opportunity because, yeah, like I said, it's just like it got to help me add different faces to my portfolio and just get a bunch of experience shooting with different people, which then escalated to other models that had a little bit more experience be willing to look at my portfolio and then say like, okay, yeah, I'm down to try working with you, you know? And then as that went on, I just kept working with more people and that kind of thing. And I was just shooting all the time. Like, I'm so grateful that I wasn't in school, because all of the time that I'd be like doing homework in the afternoon and that kind of stuff, like I was out shooting like as much as I could, learning things along the way. Like in the beginning, with that lesson that he gave me, I was like I got to the point where I was confident shooting in the shade or like really cloudy weather. But when the sun was like blazing, I was like, I do not know what to do. Like it took me a while to figure out what camera settings would make that look okay and be like normal. Just shot my brains out. And then it got to a point where I was getting a little bit older. I mean, I was still underage, but my dad was like, okay, Krista, you need to start making money. So either you can help me in the surfboard business or you need to figure something out. And so we explored the idea of me shaping, and I shaped a couple boards, like my own board that I still ride sometimes to this day. But that was definitely his passion and not mine. Like that wasn't the road that I wanted to go, even though we tested it. I think he would have been stoked, of course, if he had like his daughter wish a shaper too, but we all have our own dreams. Like I freaking love surfing. I'm so grateful for the ocean, and surf is just so awesome, but the board shaping part is just not where my heart lies. I like being a photographer. So I'm like writing in my journal, like, okay, like my goal is to make $1,000 this month, which is like more money than I've ever had in my life. Like it was like a big goal for me at the time, which is so funny because like at this point in my career, I can make $1,000 off of one shoot, which is just like, I feel so incredibly blessed. But to me at that point in my life was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I'm going to have to like book this many shoots at this much. And then like, it was just so funny. But with that too, that was when it started of, okay, so how am I going to get people to book me? And so lots of people ask me this all the time. Like, so how did you start getting brands to like trust you to shoot their stuff and pay you and everything? And so truthfully what I did, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend because it just was impersonal, and I would never do this again, and never now in my career. But I would email hundreds of companies every single day, and like I had like my little template of I would shoot this many looks for this much. Like, I'm actually having a little sale right now. If you want to book this, then you can do this. Like, just, and I'd send it out to hundreds of companies all over the world. And maybe I'd get like 1 or 2 people to respond back, but that was enough for me. Like, you know, that's what made it worth it, because then I'd get money and I'd get closer to my goal, which I was able to meet, which is just kind of crazy. That was the beginning. And that's like what I did. I would just reach out to choke different places and just kind of hope for the best. Like something would stick. And with that, there was like some really cool opportunities. And there's definitely some companies that I still work with to this day from that stage. And I'm grateful for them and that they don't like judge me based off of my work at that point. That's how I started making money for the most part from it. And then I was just doing my thing. I was a kid still, so I didn't have a lot of responsibility or expenses in my life. So I was just doing that for a few years. And then I got to the point where I was turning like around 18, I think. And then it was like, okay, you've been making some money, like you've been doing this for yourself, but if you realistically want to like live and do all of these things that you dream of, like moving out to your own place and all of this, like the money that you're making now isn't gonna cut it. Like you need to figure out how to make more. That was a point that I'm like, okay, what can I do? And I was always told that even though I was liking this brand opportunities, that weddings are where the money is for photography. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna start doing weddings then. And I wasn't against it. Like I still found interest in it, and it was what I initially wanted to start as anyway. So then I reached out to a few wedding companies, wedding photography companies, to see if they needed second shooters. And like at this point, I had no idea what second shooter rates were, like, or anything. Like I've shot a couple weddings at that point, but nothing real. Like I did not know anything about it basically. But the email that ended up sticking was with a company called Vivid Photos. And the reason for that was actually they had an employee on board for video. His name is Derek, who I'm super grateful for too. And he did model work as well, so shot with models. And he actually had a shoot with the model Katie Daly the same day that I did. So he shot her, and then I guess she was telling him that like, oh yeah, this other photographer, Krista, is gonna pick me up to go to our next shoot. And so that's how he saw my work. And then when my email came through, I guess Melissa, who is one of the owners of Vivid Photos, told him, this girl is reaching out, like, do you think we should give her a chance? And he was like, yeah, I think we should give her a chance. Like, I've seen some of her stuff, so stoked for that door opening. And so she emailed me back like, yeah, you can come in for like an interview. And so I went, and that was like the first job interview of my life, because I never had a job. That was it. That was the beginning. You know, I always like worked with my dad or worked for myself. And so that was definitely something, like, all of it was just kind of crazy, and I'm so grateful that she decided to give me a chance. So that company is like owned by a husband and wife team, so Mel and Val, who have just become great friends in my life, and also like the best mentors I could ask for. Like they truly taught me how to make the photography thing profitable and make it something I could live off of, and just so much. I'm so grateful for them. And Mel is definitely somebody that I'd love to have on the podcast too, because she's such a boss babe as well. Like she built her business and she just had a baby too. So I'd love to talk to her about how that has impacted her journey as an entrepreneur as well. So I started shooting weddings with them, and that was cool. They taught me a lot. I learned more about composition and all of that kind of stuff, along with time-wise, how to get through the wedding, just organizing files and stuff, like even down to the littlest thing of like how to name the shoot in your drive so that it's like easily found and in order by date instead of just like random names in there. Oh, I can't even express how helpful that was and how thankful I am for that. And even more so down the line, they decided that they wanted to start a family photography brand that's kind of like a sister company to Vivid Photos. And so that was going to be called Nest Family Portraiture. And Mel at the time was really taking care of a lot for Vivid. So they asked me to kind of be in charge of starting Nest and doing a lot of the back end stuff for that. She would still be shooting too, so we would kind of take turns shooting. I would do a lot of the family and maternity stuff, and then she would do the baby stuff. So with that, I was really doing a lot of starting this new brand and building it from nothing. And so that was some of the most like priceless experience that I ever had. I think that was so helpful in my journey to this day because I got to see from the beginning how to like set it up. And it also just gave me so much confidence because they were pricing the packages at a place that I wasn't super comfortable with at the time. Like I remember when they set the price where it was, I was like afraid to sell it. I was afraid that, I didn't feel that my work was worth that. And when they really broke it down, like they had me figure out, okay, it takes us this much time to do this, like the editing takes this much time and the cost for those hours is this, like it totally made sense, the price point. It was just my own fear and like imposter syndrome of like, oh my God, like my work isn't worth that. And we're going to be charging people for that? Like that's crazy. But with the breakdown, I was like, okay, you know what? We're doing it like this, basically, whether I like it or not. And so when we did, it was like, oh, I'm so grateful that they stood strong in asking for what we deserved for that. Because with the price breakdown, like I said, it proved that we did need to be putting it at that point so that it would be worth it for all of us and we would make enough that we could give the best experience and everything. And so with that, we would book and I would shoot, and basically people were booking us to have me shoot for that rate and even like the higher packages, and people were so happy with what they were getting from us and they loved their pictures, and that just felt so good. And it felt good to shoot families and to shoot something that they can look back on of their kids at that age. And so that was a huge step in my journey, and their mentorship through everything was just so incredible. They really helped me and helped me gain the confidence of bringing ideas to the table, ideas of how we could make the company better or projects that we could do to advertise and stuff. So I'm just so grateful. Kind of looping back through all of this in 2019, even though I was getting to have a career as a photographer and work with these amazing people, I still had the hardest year of my life. I was so unhappy and just everything. I was just burnt out and I didn't have any grasp on the concept of work-life balance. I've always been taught to work really hard, and that's something that I pride myself in. But it was just way too much. It was constant. Like if I got an email while I'm in the middle of dinner, like I was on it, like reading it. Even if I wasn't responding at that very second, it was already consuming my mind. And that's just so not the way to go, guys. But I didn't know what to do. We were still doing the wedding things as well and shooting weddings a lot, like pretty much every weekend. It was intense and I was just so burnt out. And not to say that we weren't giving, well, this was all on my own heart. And not to say I wasn't giving beautiful photos for the things that I was doing and like being in it for that moment, but just mentally, it was just too much, And so this all came to a head because, well, okay, I was definitely in denial about how not okay I was. Luckily, in like modern day society, I feel like the idea of going to therapy isn't really like frowned upon at all. It's like a great way to find out more about yourself, and it can really help people, and it's just, there's not as much of a stigma around it. And so being in denial about just going crazy in my brain and how unhappy I was, I like convinced myself that like I want to go to therapy just to find out more about myself. And so I called my insurance company and asked them like if it could be covered for me to have therapy. And they were like, oh, why? Like what's bothering you? And I'm like, nothing's bothering me. I just like want to find myself a little bit more. And they're like, okay, well, we can have you go into the office and have a consultation. And then if they feel they want to recommend you, then it can be covered. So I'm like, okay, perfect. Like, let's do it. So I set up my consultation, and I'm telling you, I go in there and I'm fine. Like, going with that whole, I just want to find myself. And by the end of it, I'm like sobbing, like crying about all of like just how shitty I felt in life. It was terrible, but also great because clearly they were like, okay, this girl definitely needs this referral. Like, let's send her to somebody now. And so that was the start of like starting to feel better because I was just in such a negative place. And then on top of that, like kind of around the same time, I met a friend, Alexis. We met at a wedding that I was shooting, and she was doing video, I was doing photo. And at that time, I think I was totally going to my therapist, who I loved. She was so freaking awesome. And one of the things we would like talk about was that I just didn't really have a great support system as far as girlfriends go, because all of my girlfriends had moved to the mainland. Like, all of my best friends went to college or just moved on with their life in another state or country or something. So I just didn't have girls to spend time with. It was just more like I was spending all of my time with the person that I was in a relationship with at the time. And it was just not a good situation. I was just not happy and feeling good or satisfied in my life. So Alexis at the wedding, I decided to ask for her Instagram, and like in the back of my head, I'm like, maybe I'll shoot my friendship shot, but I totally didn't end up doing that. But we just had been following each other for a bit, and then she went and shot her friendship shot with me. So she DM'd me and asked me if I wanted to get coffee. So we met up for coffee, and then we were talking, and both of us are in such a terrible place in our life. We're just complaining to each other back and forth, but like just getting along really well. And then it came to a point where the documentary The Secret came up. And if you haven't watched The Secret, I definitely highly recommend it. It's basically how I was introduced to manifesting and the law of attraction, and how our mindset and attitude on things can really attract different scenarios into our life. And so we both knew that all of this negativity that we were in, it was like not helping anything. It was just keeping us stuck there, keeping us feeling shitty. And so, but we were like in such a, I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate, especially if you do practice some of these spiritual things. It's like when you're in such a place where you're so down in the dumps, it's like you don't want to even like even though this isn't helping you, it's like you don't even want to change your mindset or like make it better because you're just like so in that negative place. But we were like, you know what? We literally just complained to each other for this whole time. Like, what the hell are we doing? We need to just watch The Secret again. Maybe it'll like make us feel better and spark us back into like getting our shit together and getting our emotions back in order. And so we set up a day, and like within that week we watched it, and that was like a huge turning point in my life. I think that with seeing my therapist, she helped me a ton because she really helped me to set up boundaries around work-life balance and just talk through what I was thinking and all of my overwhelmment and anxiety and stuff. And I know this is all over the place. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm trying to like gather all of my thoughts. But in therapy as well, like I was just so overwhelmed with the burnout and everything. And the anxiety in me was like at the point where I'd have panic attacks and be like, it was just so crazy to think about the contrast between that point in my life and now, like complete 180. So one of the greatest tips she ever gave me that truly changed my life, and it's so simple. She's like, okay, I hear you, you're overwhelmed, all of these things, but what are you doing for yourself? And I'm like, coming to this? And she like laughed at me like, oh my gosh, okay, like, but are you like exercising? And I'm like, no, like I was doing no physical activity at this point in my life either, which is like, no wonder you felt so shitty. But anyway, I didn't know this at that time. My relationship with working out was like, in the past when it'd just be like to lose weight and so intense, like I need to do so much. And it was just like, my relationship with that was just like, I don't even like working out anymore. So she's like, you should just try walking. Like it really helps a lot of my patients a lot, or like my clients, I guess, I don't know. But just go walk. Like the slippers that you're wearing right now, like you can just walk outside for like 20 minutes and then come back. Like that's it. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. The way she said it just made it so simple. I was like, okay, fine. And at that point too, I wanted to feel better. I wanted to not be so overcome with all of these feelings. So I'm like, okay, Krista, you better frickin' try to do this at least, because otherwise you're just complaining, but not doing shit. And that's like not what you want. So I went home that day and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go walk in my slippers. I'm like literally like just what she said, kept it so simple. And I walked to the top of my street and back, and I'm like, oh my God, wait, I feel so like calm and good. Like, is this possible? Like my anxiety just melted away, and I'm like, oh my God, this is freaking like life-changing. Are you kidding? And so I just kept doing it. And then when I would wake up feeling really anxious or like just really not in a good space, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go on a walk. And it would always like, by the end of the walk, I'd feel so much more clear and like, okay, I got this, like, it's not even that bad. You're just freaking out and it's fine. Like you can sort through anything. And so with all of this combined, it was like I was doing the walking thing. I was feeling better already for the most part. I wasn't feeling as like just stressed. I had that tool to help me feel a little bit better. And so then with Alexis, we did our Watching the Secret date night. So she came over to my house and we watched it, and it was just, I still watch it to this day every once in a while, and every time I watch it, I feel like there's something else that pops up. The first time I watched it was when I was like 17 or 18. My dad's girlfriend actually introduced me to it. They were watching it in the living room one day, and then I hopped in and was like, oh my God. And at that point, I'm like, life-changing, like amazing. I'm totally going to use this, but it just kind of faded out over time. So I really needed that like kick in the ass to like watch it again. And I'm grateful for Alexis because together that's what made it actually happen. Like I don't think I was going to watch it, just by myself. So I do that. I'm reminded of how the law of attraction works. And like I said, definitely recommend watching it. It's on Netflix, The Secret. But if you don't know anything about manifesting, basically it's saying whatever energy you put out into the universe, you're going to receive that back. So that's like the very basic kind of an example of it. I'm not doing the best job of explaining it, but it's always just switching how you think about things and thinking of it in a positive light instead of the negative light. So like, for example, also if you're like, Okay, here's a great one for shoots, okay? For me, if I'm like, oh, I hope it's not raining, like I really need sun for this client because they want this way, and it's like really important that they need sun. So if it's raining, that's gonna freaking suck. I like really hope it's not raining. Please don't rain. You know? Chances of it raining pretty freaking high, you know? Like, I'm not setting myself up for success there. But if I put it in the phrasing of like, I'm so stoked, it's gonna be sunny, it's gonna be the perfect weather possible for what this client wants, it's gonna be beautiful, way higher chance of it being beautiful because that's what I'm attracting. And I know it's like kind of crazy to think that I can control the weather, and it just does sound crazy, but I have to say I have had moments where it's been pouring, flash flood warning and raining on us. And in my heart, I'm like, this has to happen today. It's going to be sunny. It's going to be sunny. Everybody decides to get together. Like, we're going to go. We're going to try to make this happen, even if it's like going to be raining. And we pull up to the spot that we're shooting, and all of a sudden the clouds just parted and it's like sun. I'm like, shut up, but amazing. Like, wow. But okay, oh my goodness, I'm getting all over the place. That's basically how manifesting works and the law of attraction works. Like attracts like, energy attracts energy. When you feel happy, more good shit comes. It's like that phrase, my day went from bad to worse. If like something bad happens and then you just keep staying in that negative energy, like chances are lots more junk stuff is going to happen throughout your day. So it's just something to be kind of conscious of and aware of. And I'm not by any means telling you how to live your life, but that's just what is taught in The Secret, which is what we watched. So much backstory to that. I'm so sorry. But with that, in The Secret, one of the things they talk about doing is making a gratitude list of all of the things in your life that you're grateful for. And gratitude is a really good way to get yourself into a good feeling energy that'll bring more goodness to you. So we sat there after we watched it, Alexis and I, and we wrote out our gratitudes. Like, I had a long list of all of these things, and mixed in I wrote future things that I want, and I phrased it in the way of, I'm grateful that I have this, and I'm grateful that I have that, instead of like, I want this, because saying like you want is just kind of putting it out there that you don't have it. It's something that you're wishing to have, whereas saying you're grateful and putting your energy in the place of already having it and visualizing yourself having it will help you bring that to yourself. From that night, I was on a mission to change my mindset and feel good about all of the situations that were coming, you know? With work, I was like having this mantra on the morning before work of like, I'm excited to go to work. I'm excited to go to work. I get to do all of these things. Like, the shoot's gonna go good and all of this, like just trying to feel better about everything. We started doing this at the end of 2019. So that year was like terrible, but it was super important because that terrible point is what made me change and decide to change the way I'm doing everything and looking at everything, and go into 2020 with this new kind of mindset of like on a mission to feel good. Something kind of funny that happened was Alexis was talking about how she was planning on writing her gratitudes in her planner, and that would kind of be like every day. And I didn't have a planner at the time. And then the next day, a client gifted me like a new 2020 planner. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, like alignment, stoked. I'm going to use this to write my gratitudes every day. And so that was something that I really committed to for all of 2020. To just write a couple like bullet points or whatever of what I was grateful for. And that was like one of the huge things that I think made that year so awesome. I was doing my thing. I was still doing the family stuff, and it was going well. I was feeling good about it. I was feeling just better about life in general. And then the pandemic hit. And luckily, I was already in a place where I knew that my mindset was controlling a lot of my own personal life experience. And my heart does go out to everybody who is affected by COVID, like financially and medically and everything. But for me, 2020 was the best year of my life and I'm grateful, and I hope that 2021 is even better. But I really feel like I found myself that year with all of these practices and spirituality and everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, I definitely had a point in the beginning where I was like, oh my gosh, this sucks. Like, I'm stuck in the house. I was living by myself in a studio. So it was just like, I was really by myself because, you know, in the beginning of quarantine, it was like super serious. Like, I mean, not saying that it got less serious, but everybody was just taking it extremely seriously, like not doing anything. I did that, and I was like, decided to switch my mindset about being like, I'm all alone and lonely, this is lame, to like, I'm so grateful that I have all of this time to do whatever the hell I want. And you know, it was like the forced break from shooting really re-inspired me and made me stoked about shooting again. Like, I was so eager to shoot that I did like a FaceTime photo shoot with one of my models in California, Michaela Ryan. And I was like so happy about that. Like, I just wanted to shoot so bad. And so that was something that I hadn't felt for a long while because there was just so much going on that it was like, bam, bam, bam. Like, I was just like in work mode of like, okay, this is what I need to get. And not to say that I wasn't like getting beautiful work for my clients, but it wasn't like lighting me up, you know? And so my first shoot back from quarantine was actually with Haley, who is the owner of Ocean Creations. We did a little shoot of her wearing her pieces. And at that point, she was actually had just quit her day job. I don't know how much I should say. I definitely want her to come on and tell her own story. But basically, that really inspired me. Like, she was like, yeah, like she was still in that place of kind of like fear of like, man, I hope this works out. And, you know, if not, then like I can always go back, you know. She's never had to. Like, she is doing amazing. Her brand is thriving. She's making people so stoked with her beautiful jewelry. Like, all of the jewelry I'm wearing right now is Ocean Creations. And we later went to start a partnership together. But I tell her all the time too, like, you really inspired me when you did that. And to see that she was succeeding after she took that scary step out, it was just awesome. So I kept doing that. I kept working with Nest and Melissa and Bal and everything. And I was grateful for that. I felt better in doing those shoots as well. But with my re-inspiration and just kind of living my life more spiritually, you know, like, I would pray to God, or I know some people like to say the universe, and I would meditate more in all of that free time that I had. And I also was sent a book actually by Bao, who is one of the owners of Vivid, the husband, and it was called Super Attractor by Gabrielle Bernstein. And I love that book. Like, if you guys are interested in something that really teaches you how to manifest and like how to control your emotions better, like, I highly recommend. And if you want to like shoot me a DM, then I can send you a link to get the audio book for free, which is what he did. Like, it was so aligned and like a sign from the universe to listen to this, because at that point he didn't even really like listen to it. He just thought that I would enjoy it. And even to this day, he has listened to it and like it wasn't even his favorite. So it's like, I'm so grateful to God that he sent that to me, like fully, like that was just perfect alignment that I got to have that book, because that taught me an insane amount about just using it to my ability more. It also taught me about free writing. So that's something that helps me to use spirituality in my business a lot. So basically what it does is like, well, okay, in general, it's like saying that God and spirit wants to help us with literally anything, from like the smallest thing, like cleaning your house, to whatever, right? I would do things like meditate and then ask like, please tell me what to do in my business, like if there's anything I should do, and then I would just write. So it's like, free writing is like just write whatever flows onto the page, even if you think it's like nonsense, like that's fine. And this is a tool that really works for me. I know there's a lot of ways to connect to guidance, but for me, this is my favorite as of right now anyway. And so I just write, and then all of these ideas of exactly what I should do for my business and how to make it profitable just came onto the page. Like these ideas that I've never had for myself. I'm like, this is so unreal. Like I don't have to do this alone. This is amazing. So basically through that process, it told me that I need to change my packaging structure, exactly how I need to price it out, the different things that I could offer. It told me to start my Chris Taylor Club, which is a little box that I make for my clients and to just give them the best experience. And it came through in the meditation of like, stop being afraid to charge this amount, because if you do this, you will be able to do less shoots, which means that you're going to be fully inspired for the shoots that you do. And if you do this much, then you can really give every client the experience that they need to have the best, you know? I can give them the best if I do this. So I'm like, oh my goodness, okay, fine, I'm doing it. And during all of this too, like during the pandemic, I also met my partner, who is just freaking amazing, and I love him. Like from the beginning, he has always been so true and loyal and just genuine with me. Like he never played any games. I was the one that like, I really didn't want a relationship at that time. Like I was so happy focusing on myself and learning myself. But I was like, I mean, I'm down to talk to some guys for some excitement in my life, but I just didn't want anything serious. And I actually met him literally directly in front of my house going on a walk. He was my neighbor. Like, what? Like, talk about alignment and God just sending me, attracting to me goodness because I was feeling good. And so, yeah, I definitely want to bring him on too. I know I keep saying that about like everybody I talk about, but to tell like the story of how we met, because it's definitely kind of crazy, and also how he's used manifesting in his life. But yeah, okay, so he really encouraged me too that I could do it and that I could make these changes. And so while I was working with Nest, I started implementing these changes, this different structure of my business, and I started doing it, and people would book it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is working. I'm so grateful. Like, thank you. And then I noticed that even the clients that I got were super in alignment with me, like with my way of thinking, my mindset, utilizing the law of attraction for themselves, like just other women and local women that I think are so cool and awesome that inspire me were coming to me and booking me. I'm like, this is just all time. Like, I'm so freaking stoked. So then it came to a point where it was working. I was making these bookings. I was getting clients I love, and they were totally in. It wasn't like a scary thing like I thought it might be, of like them thinking that it's just outrageously priced. And it helped with the selling of it too, because I was at a point where I did feel like it was worth it, and I felt good about, or I feel good about what I'm selling, and that my stuff can really help their businesses and really help to showcase what they're creating. And it just was awesome. And I started getting busier with that stuff. And then I decided that it was the time that I was ready to go on my own. And it was definitely a hard decision to make, because I was just so grateful for all that Mel and Bao did for me with Vivid and Nest, and believing in me and teaching me all of these things. And I just felt so torn in being ready to take this step for myself, but not wanting to hurt them or like screw them over with what they were doing. And so I decided to do it, and I told them, I guess, that I am going to go on my own, and with the bookings that I have, it's just getting to be too busy to do both. And they were so kind and understanding, and I love them for that. And they're still good friends, like I said, and I definitely want Mel to be on the podcast. So now, at this point in my life, I am fully self-employed. I am doing my thing. Chris Taylor Photography is my baby. I have freaking clients that I adore. I moved into a bigger home with the love of my life, and I have my own office now, which I'm sitting in. If you're like watching the video, you can see. And I just feel so full and incredibly grateful for everything that God has given to me and that I have been able to manifest, and for all of the things that are to come, and for this journey, for this podcast. Like, I didn't mention it at the beginning, but this is also something that came through in a meditation and free write to start this. And like, it was something that I was like, no way, like, I'm not going to do that. Me, a podcast, like crazy. But it just was something that was persistently given to me, and I kept getting guidance on it. And I was like, okay, fine, I get it. Like, you're not going to stop telling me that I need to do this, so I'm going to do it. And so I'm grateful. And once I gave in to the thought of doing it, I just got so excited about everything that's to come, and to give other female entrepreneurs here in Hawaii like a chance to share their story and inspire other girls. All of you listening to this, in your businesses or in your future businesses, you can have anything. And the opportunities are just endless. We live in such an abundant world, and there's endless amounts of money and happiness and everything for all of us. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to do this, and stoked and thankful for you if you listen to this point. I think this thing is going to be pretty long. I've been talking for a while, but I just am so happy that this is the start of something cool, and I can't wait for the next episode with my very first guest. And I hope you guys just have a really awesome day. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. I'm definitely going to try to have this on Apple Podcasts as well. So if you're there, then please leave me a review if you enjoyed this. And on Spotify, I guess you can follow. I don't know. I need to figure that part out. But also, you can follow me on Instagram and see my work. I'll put all of my links and everything in the description of this podcast. But yes, I just hope you guys have the best day, and thank you so much again for listening. Okay, bye.